The first race of the season is behind us, and there's no time to waste. The highly anticipated Chinese Grand Prix is just days away. With a sprint race format, vastly different weather conditions, and rookies needing to redeem themselves after disappointing performances in Melbourne, this weekend promises to deliver plenty of action. Add to that a major FIA clampdown on rear wings that could shake up the competitive order, and we're looking at a Grand Prix that might completely change the narrative of the 2025 season. Heading into Shanghai, the biggest difference from Melbourne will be the weather. The unpredictable conditions that threw teams off in Australia won't be a factor this time. Expect stable temperatures ranging between 11 degrees Celsius and 26 degrees Celsius throughout the weekend, with no rain expected to interfere. This should be great news for Ferrari, who blamed much of their struggles in Melbourne on poor adaptability to changing conditions and flawed communication between the pit wall and drivers. With a dry track and more consistent conditions, they have no excuses left. It's time to prove they can fight at the front. The sprint format adds another layer of excitement. For midfield teams, it presents a golden opportunity to pick up extra points that could make a difference in the constructors' battle. But it's not just the underdogs who will be looking to capitalize. The sprint gives Ferrari, Red Bull, and other top teams a shot at narrowing the early season gap to McLaren, who looked like they were in a league of their own at Albert Park. Beyond the sprint and weather conditions, the biggest talking point heading into this race is the FIA's new rear wing directive. The ongoing controversy surrounding flexible rear wings carried over from 2024 into this season, and now the FIA has taken action right after Melbourne. While all cars were deemed legal at the time, footage from rear-facing cameras raised enough suspicion for the FIA to implement stricter testing procedures. Previously, the allowed flex in the rear wing slot gap was 2 millimeters. Effective immediately, that number has been slashed to just 0.5 millimeters. Due to the short notice of the rule change, the FIA will allow a tolerance of up to 0.75 millimeters for the Shanghai race, but after that, the limit will be strictly enforced at 0.5 millimeters. The governing body has made it clear that while teams may have found legal loopholes to exploit, they won't allow anything that compromises the sporting integrity of F1. Ferrari and McLaren are the two teams expected to be most affected by the change, which is why Red Bull believes they can take a significant step forward in China. Before the season started, early predictions suggested that Red Bull were around half a second behind McLaren in outright pace, but in Australia, that gap appeared to be closer to 0.3 seconds per lap in dry conditions. The race itself painted an even clearer picture. McLaren had a commanding 1-2 lead before the rain came and disrupted the battle. If Red Bull's suspicions about Ferrari and McLaren's rear wings are correct, and the regulation changes have a meaningful impact, Verstappen could suddenly find himself back in the fight for race wins. We've seen time and time again that Verstappen doesn't need the fastest car on the grid to dominate. If this new directive helps close the performance gap, the championship battle could get a whole lot more interesting. Even though Red Bull were well off McLaren's pace in Melbourne, particularly in qualifying where Verstappen was nearly half a second down, a change in Shanghai could put them right back in the mix. But let's not pretend that Ferrari and McLaren are the only ones who may have been pushing the limits with their rear wing designs. Aston Martin and Sauber have also been suspected of running similar concepts, meaning this rule change isn't just about stopping a McLaren dominance, it's about enforcing consistency across the grid. This situation is eerily similar to what happened in Hungary in 2023, when Aston Martin introduced a completely legal rear wing that was later banned due to sporting regulations. Many fans are frustrated with how F1 handles innovation, believing that the sport is too quick to shut down creative engineering solutions. However, Sky F1's Bernie Collins believes teams will struggle to adapt to the changes in time for Shanghai. As these aren't minor tweaks, they could significantly impact car performance. Collins explained, "The rear wing's slot gap, the space between the main plane and the movable flap, has a defined limit. The FIA applies a load to it in testing to make sure it doesn't flex beyond a certain point. That limit used to be 2 millimeters, but now it's just 0.5 millimeters. This means teams that were relying on flexibility in that part of the car to gain straight-line speed will have to make quick changes. And with only a few days between Australia and China, it's a massive challenge. Ferrari, in particular, needs a strong performance in Shanghai. Their weekend in Melbourne was a disaster. They were out-qualified by Racing Bulls and Williams and had a dismal race, finishing in the lower points positions. Now, with stable conditions and no rain to blame, the team must sort out its strategy and communication failures. Fixing their setup issues is also crucial, as their race pace fell apart in Australia, leaving them unable to fight for the podium. Team principal Fred Vasseur remains optimistic, saying, "In Australia, we didn't see the real Ferrari. In China, we start from scratch." That statement may sound reassuring, but fans have heard similar promises before. Ferrari entered the season as one of the favorites alongside McLaren, yet their performance in Melbourne was nowhere near championship contending levels. If they don't make a significant step forward in China, they could find themselves falling behind both McLaren and Red Bull. Another major storyline to watch is how the rookies perform. Apart from Antonelli, who impressed by climbing from P16 to finish P4, and Bo Man, who at least managed to finish the race, most of the newcomers struggled in Melbourne. Liam Lawson, in particular, is under immense pressure. Despite being the most experienced rookie with 12 F1 races under his belt, he had an abysmal performance in Australia. Even before the chaotic weather conditions took over, he was nowhere near the front-running pace. His crash after Turn 1 was a gamble gone wrong, and in China, there won't be any excuses left. With stable conditions and a clean slate, Lawson must deliver or risk losing favor with Red Bull, especially with Yuki Tsunoda still fighting hard for that 2026 seat. The stakes are high for everyone. Ferrari is desperate for redemption. Red Bull wants to capitalize on McLaren's potential rear-wing setback, and rookies like Lawson are battling for their futures. The Chinese Grand Prix is shaping up to be a race full of answers. What do you think? Will Ferrari bounce back, or will McLaren continue to dominate? Will the FIA's rear-wing crackdown shake up the grid, or will teams find a way around it? And which rookie do you think has the most to prove this weekend? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on Ferrari's latest developments after their Melbourne disaster, check out the video on your screen now.